Hello and welcome to the Dark Side Vlogcast. My name is Jackson O'Keefe and I am a student journalist at ECU. We come to you today from the amazing TV studio at ECU's Mount Lawley campus, but before I begin, I would like to respectfully acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land upon which we are filming today. We are meeting on Whadjuk Noongar Boodja, and I would like to thank and pay respects to elders past, present and emerging. Now, this vlogcast series will be made up of 3 episodes where I, along with art expert Professor Ted Snell, take a deep dive into the world of the arts as we explore the relationship between art and mental health. Ladies and gentlemen, I give to you Professor Ted Snell.
Hey Jackson, how are you?
I'm well, thanks Ted. How are you?
Very good.
Good. So, it is my understanding that you're working on this fabulous project at the moment. Why not give us a little insight into that?
Well, the idea of the project is to try and explore how the dark side in everybody's life is used by artists to do multiple things, really. First of all, probably to find some sense in the world, that art making and looking at the world and creating works is a way of finding your own place, making sense. That finding your own way too is important because it gives you a sense of space. I think one of the things that artists find most of all is that you create this space for yourself in the studio or wherever you're working, and that is a very calming, often, sometimes frustrating, but generally speaking a calming place to be. And of course it's also a way of confronting your fears and the dangerous and unsure world that we live in. One of the things about art making is that you can deal, and art in general, is that you can deal with really difficult issues in a relatively safe way. So you can confront your fears, explore them, examine them, and then step back a bit. So the idea of this exhibition is to look at the work of, there are 13 artists all told, and they're all in their works examining this dark side of their own practice and of their own lives, and seeing it as a source, as a productive source for the creation of their work.
And is there a particular reason why now, of all times, you're wanting to explore this theme of the dark side?
Well, it's a good question. I mean, there's a couple of answers to that. Of course, we've just come out of COVID-19, and of course, everybody has been confronting their dark side during COVID-19.
That's right.
And we have been confronted with the whole idea of a pandemic which is killing millions and millions of people. It's horrific. The other reason is that there is an exhibition. This is done in partnership with the National Art School in Sydney, and they're doing an exhibition of the great Australian artist John Olsen. And John Olsen has always acknowledged the depressive side of his character. He did a portrait for the Archibald Prize with a Janus-faced self-portrait, both looking to the darkness and looking to the light. And so the idea was that we would explore these issues in Western Australia in the same way that they're exploring them through the work of John Olsen in Sydney, and that we would share our research into how the visual arts can be used as a tool, as we were saying before, to both confront and also, in some sense, resolve also that tension between the dark side and the light side in everyone's life.
And I do agree, especially now is more relevant than ever. People who seemingly live happy lives with an intact mental health. I use myself as an example. I'm a generally happy person. But even, the COVID pandemic, as short as it was here in WA, something about being locked down in my house alone, no friends to talk to, I was angry. I was upset. I was walking around the house. I was moping around, and I didn't really know what to do with myself. So I think that, you would get some amazing new art, new ideas that have come to light because of the pandemic.
It was very interesting that in fact, the way that many people dealt with that was to stand out on their balconies and to bang saucepan lids together.
That's right.
To create music. That the Rolling Stones, played music in their separate rooms and then broadcasted it to the world. So I think the idea of being engaged in some sort of creative practice, we all know that is very good for health and for well-being. And so this exhibition and this project, the podcast that we're doing, and plus the symposium, is all about that too. It's about finding how we can improve the health and well-being of our community through understanding that art is a very, very productive force.
So, Ted, did you want to sort of give us more information about your role as the curator, because you are the curator of this exhibition. What does that role entail?
Well, the curator is a sort of the chef who pulls together all the ingredients and puts them in the oven, and then hope that the oven being the gallery, and then allowing people to have the taste of all of the wonderful goods that are actually presented there. So
beautiful
it
analogy.
is just a sort of a coordinating role more than anything. My first role as a part of the curation project is to find the artists, and that actually wasn't all that hard. There were so many artists that I immediately thought of whose practice seems to me to encapsulate those ideas we were talking about before, of making sense of the world, of creating a safe space for themselves, of providing enjoyment, which of course is something, you know, that in sense of health and well-being, that ability to smile that you were mentioning before, that ability to interact with somebody, to look at their work and say, ah, yeah, I think that, I feel that. So it wasn't hard to find the artists. In fact, the difficulty was to pare down the number of artists. Then I approached them all. We talked about how they might interact with this project. And so the next step is to pull those works together, to put them on the wall, and to see the exhibition really just sparkle, and the artists talk to each other across the space, which is one of the most enjoyable parts of installing an exhibition, seeing how the different works react to each other.
I can imagine. And after all of this, after the exhibition's done, what is it that you hope to achieve?
I think what any curator hopes to achieve is that people enjoy the work. That's the first thing, that they enjoy the experience. But they also go away with something which they hadn't been aware that they were looking for. That you discover something about yourself, or you discover something about the world that you inhabit. You see the world differently. You ask different questions. All of a sudden the world becomes a place of inquiry rather than just a given, a set of facts that are laid out before you. So that's what I am hoping. I would obviously, of course, hope that it would be very good for people's well-being and health. I also hope that people will understand that you can be proactive in your own mental health by engaging with some sort of creative practice. That there is a definite, clear advantage to being a creative person, because it does enable you to deal with some of the things in your life which otherwise just seem to be impossible.
And when and where can we find this exhibition?
Well, the exhibition will be held both on campus here at Edith Cowan in Gallery25, and also at There Is Gallery in Northbridge. It'll be opening on the 27th of May, and it will run through until the 17th of June. So the exhibition will be available to the public in two sites, and we're actually hoping that people will go to both. It's not carved in half. The two parts of each artist's work have a dialogue, and so it'd be important to go between the two galleries and to see how the works interact with each other.
Well, I look forward to it. I know I'll be attending both, and for you watching, I highly encourage it, because there's going to be some great work there for sure. Ted, thank you.
Thank you, Jackson.
So we now have the privilege of talking to a couple of the artists involved in Ted's exhibition, Nicola Kaye and Lyndall Adams. Guys, how are you?
Really good, thank you.
Good, well, thank you for being here. Now, how about you start by letting us know what your involvement is in the exhibition?
Well, Lyndall and I and Marcella Pauline and Stephen Terry worked collaboratively on we're still working collaboratively on a project, but its first iteration happened last year in the height of COVID, and really as a consequence of the experience that we were all going through at that time.
So definitely would have fitted in with the theme of the dark side, you know, and especially with COVID and lots of people sort of dealing with new kinds of mental struggles with COVID. So it really would have been an interesting time to explore.
As artists, one of the things that we do is respond to context and situations, and obviously this crisis that, as we were talking, of course it was emerging, and it still is, but you know, it was emerging. So not only did it impact on our academic life, also our personal lives, and obviously as artists. So this kind of conflation of all those different roles, if you like, that make up who we are. And it was very much a response to that time and how we could work collectively and actually forge a response to the ongoing crisis as it was developing.
And that space became one that is always in the margins, because we were so conscious of our private spaces becoming public and our public spaces becoming private, and we all work in kind of interstitial spaces anyway, and that conflation of the erasure of parts of our private life and what was new. So Nicola works with alleyways and weeds.
So it was for us, well, what did we want to bring to this collaboration? And of course we are very close in our working life anyway, in personal life, but it was certain parts of our practices, our respective practices, that then converged. But they didn't converge in a manner that was, you know, that wasn't driven by aesthetics, or it was really driven by the moment, you know, that moment of how, and also our mental health actually, and how we were responding to that particular time. So I think that, you know, Stephen and my work, we've collaborated for a long time, but really it was about the weeds, it was about this kind of introduced species, the idea that the weed is something that we try and get rid of, but it still remains and it's prolific. And also alleyway spaces, you know, more sort of subterranean spaces, or spaces that are there but we try and erase, you know. It was about using a kind of contestation of works. And Lyndall's work.
Well, the work for this particular exhibition I'd been making for about 20 years, so it's a set of obscenities that I've been embroidering.
Oh,
and
wow.
I'd embroider them, you know, when my kids were at football training or swimming. You know, I'd be stitching away in Belgian linen, or I'm a painter, but this has been a work that's just been evolving without me really knowing where it's going.
Yeah.
But we all really wanted to swear.
Yeah. Because
You know?
it was a difficult time.
It was a difficult time. So I said,
You enabled that.
I've got this set of works that I'm still making. And so that's the background to the work. I had them stretched. It was so quick I didn't even have time to stretch them myself. I had to take them and have them done. And a lovely outcome of that is we also sent this kit to academics in Melbourne. I made a new set of swear words, obscenities, and we sent them to feminist academics in lockdown in Melbourne in their 3 months. So they got a gift pack and they could stitch their own obscenity.
Yeah, wow, okay, so, and that's, you've been working on that for over 20 years?
20 years. As a kind of, you know, artists always have what Greg Pryor calls a decoy project that just gets you out of other projects that you're working on. So that's been mine.
That's interesting.
And yeah.
How did you find that you know, your work changed over the years as you went on through your mental journey of life?
Oh, look, that's just been an enormous journey, but this one's stayed, but it's never been the right time. But I think that all of us work a lifetime of work, not as one thesis, not in separate projects. There's a connection all the way through.
But then we really used the time in the gallery, didn't we, to actually install the work, and that became our space, as artists do. You know, the install time is so important, and we obviously had ideas of how we were going to bring it together, but it was working in the space, I think, that was the most really great. Fantastic for us, wasn't it?
And it was wonderful watching Marcella, because Marcella's a writer, so her, you know, I'm a painter, and so my time on my own is, I spend a lot of time solo in the studio. But she spends a lot of time inside a computer or writing, not even in a whole room, but, you know. And so the work that she contributed is about the edits in writing, the unseen writing. So it's the handwritten edits on the text that she's writing of poems, etc. And they scroll through this work and over the obscenities. So they erase and they write again that image all the time, which is called palimpsest, which is one of the things that we're all very interested in, that erasure and the writing again, which is in a way what this virus has done.
Yeah, it does reflect that, doesn't it?
Yeah, so it was really interesting for her because she's used to that static text on a page, so it's been watching Marcella being
Yeah.
really quiet and, you know, change through this project of how this has turned into sort of concrete poetry
Yes.
that in another way, a very different way. So that's been really nice as well.
So for Stephen and I, in our practice over the last 20 years or so, we've really been looking very much at the underprivileged spaces and people that don't have a voice. Now, of course, that becomes a little bit interesting as I'm sitting as an academic, and obviously I acknowledge my privilege. But at the same time, you know, we were attracted to different spaces or alternative spaces, let's say. And I think that, you know, that the alleyways for us was an opportunity, you know, just to actually reflect on, well, what happens alternative to kind of mainstream ideas of how things should be. And, you know, our work in the past has touched on issues pertaining to, you know, really personal issues, but also broader issues of societal issues. And for us, our art practice has always tried to champion, if you like, or work around or put ourselves into a space in which we are questioning what is a social space and how can you actually, you know, rather than a hierarchical space, how can you work in a manner that raises questions and engenders debate. So for us, and we've worked in very privileged spaces, like such as the WA Parliament spaces, right down to working in public toilets and producing work around that and its very many uses. So we're drawn to, let's call it, those darker spaces because that's part of who we are, that's part of society. So for us, that kind of converged, you know, with Lyndall in those dark spaces that you're looking at, that we all inhabit, but at the same time within a gallery context, and it's also within a university gallery space in which we have obviously a particular role, you know, as academics. And then here was a work that was actually openly questioning, openly defiant, and openly not wanting to be put into a box, you know. And I think we've had a few people comment on the work and actually really enjoy the expletives, you know, and almost feeling that it was a sense of release, you know. So I think that, and with Marcella, with the way that, you know, some of the text that she used was again dealing with those darker issues, dealing with who we are as human beings. And how are we in this world? You know, how do we navigate this space?
How do we navigate the space we find ourselves in? And I think both Marcella and I have sons who have some problems, and so a lot of the work, you know, I can't speak for Marcella in this instance, but we do have that in common. For me, I've always worked as a feminist artist. And I work as a phenomenologist, so I work the world out in the studio, as you know, phenomenologically. And so when things happen in my life, I tend to go to the studio and work through it, and I'm working on a big series as well at the moment. But I've always done that. It's something that's, and I always try and find the funny side as well. If I always think if an artwork amuses me, it's going to amuse someone else.
Yeah.
So those expletives always have, even as I'm stitching them.
Yeah.
I'm giggling, thinking, how does this one look in this font, and you know, that sort of thing. But all of the other work as well. Probably the darkest work I'm making is at the moment, but it still has some sense of humour in it as well.
Well, that's great. I think that, you know, you can find that because there is, without a doubt, a beauty to it, the darkness, a beauty to the darkness. But you know, that's great. I think that's so good that you know, you as artists can find that and use that darkness to, you know, produce something beautiful. Guys, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Well, that's it for episode 1 of this series. If you enjoyed it, why not give the other episodes a watch? In the next episode, I'll continue my discussions with Ted as we take a closer look into the historical context surrounding mental health and the arts. I'm Jackson O'Keefe. Thank you for joining us.